The morning started like any other morning on Earth. The sun rose over the blue oceans. Birds sang in the trees. Children walked to school. People drank their coffee and complained about traffic. Nobody knew that this would be the last normal day in human history. Commander Jake Morrison sat in his chair at the Horizon Orbital Station. He watched his screens and checked the same data he checked every day. Satellites moved in their paths. Space debris floated harmlessly in the void. Everything looked peaceful and boring, just the way he liked it. Then his screen flickered. A red warning appeared. Jake leaned forward and rubbed his eyes. He thought it was a mistake. The sensors showed something at the edge of the solar system. Something big. Something that should not be there. "Get me a visual," he said to his crew. The main screen changed. Jake felt his blood turn cold. Hundreds of ships hung in space like dark metal monsters. They were huge, bigger than anything humans had ever built. Their shapes were strange and alien. They did not belong to Earth. Jake reached for the communication controls. He had to warn someone. He had to tell the world. But before his fingers touched the button, bright lights flashed from the alien ships. Beams of energy shot across space faster than anything Jake had ever seen. The first beam hit New York City at exactly 9 in the morning. One moment, millions of people were living their lives. The next moment, there was only fire and ash. The city that never sleeps would never wake again. More beams fell from the sky. Tokyo vanished in a ball of flame. London burned. Beijing crumbled. Sydney, Paris, Moscow, Cairo, Mumbai. One by one, the great cities of Earth died. The aliens did not ask questions. They did not make demands. They simply killed. On the moon, Lieutenant Amy Dalton stood frozen at her station. She was 26 years old, with brown hair and tired eyes. She worked at a small military outpost that most people forgot existed. Now she watched Earth burn through her telescope, and she could not breathe. Her family lived in Chicago. Her mother, her father, her little brother who had just started college. She tried to call them. The line was dead. She tried again, and again. Nothing. Then she saw the flash over the Great Lakes region, and she knew. She would never hear their voices again. Amy fell to her knees. Around her, other soldiers cried and screamed. Some prayed. Some just stared at nothing. The world they knew was ending, and they could do nothing but watch. On Earth, the survivors crawled from the ruins. General Nathan Cole pushed himself out of a collapsed building near what used to be Washington. He was 52 years old with gray hair and a face like carved stone. Blood ran down his forehead. His uniform was torn and burned, but he was alive. He looked around at the destruction. Smoke filled the sky so thick that it blocked the sun. Fires burned everywhere. Bodies lay in the streets. The Pentagon, where he had worked for 20 years, was now just a crater in the ground. Nathan had seen war before. He had fought in small conflicts around the world, but nothing had prepared him for this. This was not war. This was slaughter. He found a working radio in a destroyed military truck. The channels were filled with chaos. Screaming, crying, desperate calls for help. Nobody knew what was happening. Nobody knew what to do. Nathan took a deep breath. Someone had to lead. Someone had to fight. He pressed the broadcast button. "This is General Nathan Cole. If anyone can hear me, listen carefully. We have been attacked by an alien force. Our cities are gone. Millions are dead. But we are not finished. Find weapons. Find shelter. Find each other. We will survive this. We will fight back." His words spread across the dying networks. In bunkers and basements, in forests and mountains, survivors heard his voice. For many, it was the first hope they had felt since the sky turned to fire. The alien ships moved closer to Earth. Drop pods fell from their bellies like deadly rain. When they hit the ground, doors opened and strange creatures stepped out. They were tall and covered in green scales. Their eyes were yellow and cold. They carried weapons that hummed with energy. These were the Valorians, masters of 200 conquered worlds. They had come to add Earth to their collection. Supreme Commander Vexus watched the invasion from his flagship. He was the largest of the Valorians, with dark scales and scars from many battles. He felt satisfied as he looked at the burning planet below. The humans had barely any space technology. Their weapons were primitive. This would be an easy conquest, just like all the others. "Overlord, the ground forces report resistance," one of his officers said. Vexus made a sound like laughter. "Resistance? From these creatures? They are nothing. Crush them and prepare the planet for colonization. I want this finished within one cycle." But the Valorians soon learned that humans were different from other species they had conquered. In the ruins of Los Angeles, a group of survivors ambushed a Valorian patrol. They had only hunting rifles and kitchen knives, but they fought like demons. Half of them died, but they killed 3 Valorians before falling. In the mountains of Switzerland, an old farmer drove his tractor into a group of alien soldiers, blowing himself up with dynamite strapped to his chest. In Brazil, children threw rocks at Valorian walkers while their parents shot at them with old guns. In Japan, survivors created traps from car batteries and power lines. The humans could not win these fights. They did not have the weapons or the numbers. But they fought anyway. They fought because their homes were burning. They fought because their families were dead. They fought because surrender was not in their nature. General Cole watched reports come in from around the world. Humanity was losing. The aliens were too strong, too many, too advanced. But humanity was not giving up. Every small act of defiance proved that the human spirit could not be broken by bombs or beams. He looked up at the smoke-covered sky and made a promise. This was not the end. This was only the beginning. The Valorians had made the biggest mistake in the history of their empire. They had woken a sleeping giant. They had turned a peaceful species into warriors. They had started a war they could not finish. "You hit us first," Nathan whispered to the dark sky. "You will regret it." Somewhere on the moon, Amy Dalton dried her tears and picked up her weapon. She had lost everything. Now she had nothing left to lose, and that made her the most dangerous thing in the universe. 3 years had passed since the sky burned. Earth had become a world of shadows and death. The Valorians controlled the surface, but they could not control the darkness beneath it. General Nathan Cole sat in a bunker deep under the Rocky Mountains. The walls were cold stone, lit by weak electric lights. Maps covered every surface. Red marks showed enemy positions. Blue marks showed resistance cells. There was more red than blue, but the blue marks kept appearing no matter how many the Valorians destroyed. Nathan had aged 10 years in 3. His hair was fully white now. His face had deep lines carved by worry and pain. But his eyes still burned with the same fire that had kept humanity fighting when all hope seemed lost. "Report," he said to the young officer beside him. "We lost the Denver cell last night, sir. Valorian death squads found their tunnel. 43 fighters dead." Nathan closed his eyes for a moment. 43 more names to add to the list of the fallen. The list was very long now. Millions long. But he could not afford to grieve. Not yet. "What about the supply raid in Sector 7? "Successful, sir. Captain Dalton's team captured 3 enemy vehicles and enough weapons to arm 200 fighters. Nathan allowed himself a small smile. Amy Dalton had become one of his best officers. She led a special unit called the Shadow Wolves. They moved through enemy territory like ghosts, striking fast and disappearing before the Valorians knew what hit them. The aliens had put a large bounty on her head. She wore that fact like a badge of honor. On the surface, the world looked like hell. Cities were ruins. Forests were burned. Rivers ran dirty with ash and blood. The Valorians had built their own structures over the graves of human civilization. Strange metal towers rose from the wreckage, pumping resources from the wounded earth. But underneath, in tunnels and caves and forgotten places, humanity survived. They ate whatever they could find. They slept in shifts, always watching for danger. They taught their children to fight before they taught them to read. This generation was born in darkness, and darkness was all they knew. Amy Dalton crawled through a narrow tunnel, her rifle strapped to her back. Her team followed close behind. They had been moving for 6 hours through the underground network that connected resistance bases across the continent. Every muscle in her body screamed for rest, but she pushed forward. "Captain, we're approaching the crash site," whispered her second-in-command, a large man named Danny Garcia. He was missing 2 fingers on his left hand, a gift from a Valorian torture session before he escaped. Amy nodded. 3 days ago, a Valorian cruiser had crashed in the Nevada desert. Nobody knew why it fell. Maybe engine failure, maybe human sabotage, maybe just luck. But whatever was inside that ship could help turn the tide of the war. They emerged from the tunnel at night. The desert wind carried the smell of smoke and alien chemicals. In the distance, the crashed ship lay like a dead whale, half buried in sand. Valorian patrols moved around it, but there were fewer than expected. Perhaps they had already taken what they wanted. Amy gave silent signals to her team. They had done this many times before: move slow, stay low, kill quiet. They crossed the open ground like shadows, their black clothing blending with the darkness. The first guard died without making a sound. Danny's knife found the soft spot under the Valorian's jaw. The second guard turned just in time to see Amy's rifle butt coming at his face. He fell unconscious, and another shadow wolf finished him with a blade. Inside the crashed ship, Amy found something incredible. A navigation computer. Still functional. Still glowing with strange symbols. This machine held the maps of the Valorian Empire. Every planet, every base, every route their ships traveled. In the right hands, this information could change everything. "Pack it up," Amy ordered. "We're taking it home." On the moon, Dr. Scott Palmer had not slept in 3 days. The lunar colonies had become humanity's secret weapon factory. Here, away from Valorian eyes, scientists worked day and night to understand alien technology. Scott was 40 years old with messy hair and glasses held together by tape. Before the war, he had been a professor of physics at a university that no longer existed. Now he was the leader of humanity's most important research project. He stared at the alien engine on his workbench. It was beautiful, in a terrible way. This small device could bend space itself, allowing ships to travel faster than light. If humans could build their own version, they could take the fight to the enemy. They could stop being victims and start being hunters. "I think I understand it now," he said to his assistant, a young woman named Lisa Chen, who had escaped from Earth on one of the last evacuation shuttles. "The power source is the key. They use a crystal that focuses energy in ways we never imagined. Can we make it work?" Scott smiled for the first time in months. "We can do better. We can improve it." Overlord Vexus stood in his command center and tried to understand why this conquest was taking so long. 3 years. 3 years to conquer a single primitive planet. His superiors in the Empire were growing impatient. Other commanders were laughing at him. Every time he thought the humans were beaten, they rose again. Destroy 1 base, and 2 more appeared. Kill 1 leader, and 3 more took their place. These creatures were like insects that refused to die no matter how many times you crushed them. "Increase patrols in all sectors," he ordered. "Double the executions. For every Valorian they kill, execute 100 humans. They will learn to fear us." But fear was not working. The humans he captured would rather die than talk. Some even smiled as they died, knowing that their silence protected their friends. Vexus had conquered dozens of species. He had never seen anything like this. Deep under the moon's surface, the first human faster-than-light ship took shape. It was ugly compared to Valorian vessels. It was made from scraps and salvage and desperate hope. But it would fly. They called it the Defiance. Captain Ryan Torres walked around the ship, touching its metal skin. He was 35 years old with a scar across his cheek. Before the war, he had been a cargo pilot, moving supplies between Earth and the lunar colonies. Now, he was about to become the first human to travel beyond the solar system. He had volunteered immediately. He had nothing left on Earth. His wife, his daughter, his parents, all gone in the first attack. The Valorians had taken everything from him. Now he would take everything from them. "She's ready," Scott told him. "We've tested everything we can test. The rest is up to you." Ryan climbed into the cockpit. It was cramped and smelled like burning wires. The controls were a mix of human switches and alien interfaces. It was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. "Let's go hunting," he said, and pressed the ignition. The Defiance disappeared in a flash of light. Humanity had taken its first step toward revenge. Captain Ryan Torres watched the stars blur around him as the Defiance jumped through space. His stomach felt like it was turning inside out. His head pounded with pain, but he was grinning like a child on Christmas morning. It worked. The humans had built a ship that could travel faster than light. The impossible had become possible. When the ship dropped out of hyperspace, Ryan found himself looking at a strange new world. A Valorian outpost, according to the navigation data Amy's team had stolen. It was a small moon orbiting a gas giant, covered in metal structures and defensive platforms. Ryan stayed hidden behind a nearby asteroid and watched. He counted ships, recorded patrol patterns, and noted every detail his cameras could capture. This information was more valuable than gold. This was how they would learn to fight back. For 3 weeks, Ryan jumped from system to system. He saw things no human had ever seen. Alien worlds with purple skies, space stations bigger than cities, fleets of warships that made Earth's forces look like toys, but he also saw weakness. The Valorian Empire was huge, but it was spread thin. Most of their conquered worlds had only small garrisons. Their defenses pointed outward, designed to stop enemies from entering their space. They never expected an attack from within. Most importantly, Ryan discovered that the Valorians had never faced a real challenge. Every species they conquered had surrendered quickly or been destroyed. They had no experience with an enemy that adapted, that learned, that refused to give up. Their confidence had made them lazy. Ryan returned to the moon with enough information to fill 1,000 books. He stood before General Cole and the Resistance leadership, showing them maps of the empire they were about to invade. "They think we're nothing," Ryan said. "They think we're just bugs to be crushed. That's their biggest weakness. They have no idea what's coming." General Cole studied the maps for hours. Then he called a meeting of every resistance leader who could be reached. What he proposed was insane. It was suicidal. It was the only way to win. "We're going to attack them," he announced. "We're going to take the war to their worlds, their stations, their homes. We're going to make them feel what we felt when they burned our cities." Some people laughed. Some called him crazy. But most just nodded. They had lost everything. They had nothing left to fear. The plan was complex but brilliant. First, every resistance cell on Earth would launch a massive coordinated uprising. This would force the Valorians to focus all their attention on the surface. While the enemy was distracted, a fleet of 12 newly built warships would slip away from hidden lunar shipyards. Building those ships had taken 3 years of secret work. Every piece of metal was precious. Every power cell was sacred. Humans had learned to do more with less, to create miracles from scraps. These ships were ugly and strange, but they were deadly. Amy Dalton stood on the bridge of her vessel, the Vengeance. It was smaller than a Valorian cruiser but faster and more agile. The crew was made up of survivors and orphans, people who had lost everything and wanted payback. They were perfect. "All ships report ready," came the message from the fleet commander. "Operation First Strike begins in 10 minutes. On Earth, the uprising began at exactly midnight Greenwich time. In every country, in every hidden base, resistance fighters emerged from the shadows. They attacked Valorian patrols, destroyed supply depots, and cut communication lines. The Valorians responded with overwhelming force, just as Nathan had predicted. Drop ships rushed from orbit to crush the rebellion. Ground forces abandoned their posts to hunt down the attackers. Every eye in the Empire was looking down at Earth. Nobody was looking at the moon. The 12 human warships accelerated away from the lunar colonies. Their engines burned bright for just a few seconds before they jumped into hyperspace. By the time any Valorian sensors detected them, they were already gone. Their target was a military outpost called Vex Station, named after the overlord who had conquered Earth. It was a symbol of Valorian pride, a trophy of their victory. Amy had chosen it specifically because destroying it would send a message. The human fleet emerged from hyperspace with weapons already firing. The Valorian defenders had never seen anything like it. Primitive humans with stolen technology, attacking a military installation, it was impossible. It could not be happening. But it was happening. The Vengeance led the assault, diving straight at the station's main defense platform. Amy sat in her command chair, calling out targets with cold precision. Her weapons officer, a teenager named Marcus who had been 10 years old when the invasion started, fired every gun they had. Direct hit on the primary shield generator, Marcus reported, his voice shaking with excitement. They're losing power. Press the attack, Amy ordered. Don't give them time to recover. The battle lasted 6 hours. It was brutal and bloody. 2 human ships were destroyed. Hundreds of fighters died. But when the smoke cleared, Vex Station was nothing but floating debris. The Valorian flag that had flown there for 100 years burned in the vacuum of space. General Cole recorded his message from the ruins of an old television studio. Behind him, the Resistance flag hung proudly. His face showed the scars of 5 years of war. His voice was rough but strong. This message is for Overlord Vexus and the Valorian Empire. Today, human forces destroyed your outpost at Vex Station. This is the first of many attacks. You hit Earth first. You burned our cities. You murdered our children. Now we're coming for you. This is not a war of conquest. We don't want your worlds or your resources. This is a war of retribution. And we will not stop until your empire is ash. The message was broadcast on every frequency the humans could access. It reached Valorian colonies and conquered worlds throughout the empire. For the first time in their history, the Valorians knew fear. Overlord Vexus watched the message in his command center. His scales turned pale with rage. Around him, his officers stood in silence, afraid to speak. Find them, Vexus hissed. Find every human ship, every hidden base, every hole they crawl into. I want this species erased from existence. But even as he gave the order, Vexus felt something he had never felt before. Doubt. These humans had done what no other species had done. They had struck back. They had drawn blood. And the way their general had looked at the camera, with those cold, burning eyes, Vexus knew this was just the beginning. In the lunar shipyards, construction began on 100 new warships. On Earth, recruitment for the military doubled overnight. Humans who had been hiding now stepped forward to fight. The message had done more than announce an attack. It had given humanity hope. The war for survival had become a war for revenge. And humans were very, very good at revenge. The human fleet grew like a storm gathering over the ocean. What started as 12 ships became 50, then 100, then 500. Factories on the moon worked day and night. Every scrap of metal became a weapon. Every willing hand became a soldier. Admiral Lauren Price stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Hammer. She was 48 years old with short gray hair and eyes that had seen too much death. Before the war, she had been a transport captain, moving cargo between Earth and Mars. Now she commanded the largest fleet humanity had ever built. Her strategy was different from what the Valorians expected. They thought humans would try to fight them head-on, fleet against fleet. That would have been suicide. The Valorians still had more ships, bigger guns, better technology. A direct battle would end in human defeat. Instead, Lauren attacked where the enemy was weak, supply ships carrying food and fuel to the front lines, communication satellites that connected the Empire, small outposts on distant moons where bored soldiers waited for nothing to happen. Death by 1,000 cuts, she called it. We can't knock them out with one punch, but we can bleed them dry. The attacks were relentless. Every day, somewhere in the Empire, something exploded. Valorian commanders grew paranoid. They started seeing human ships in every shadow. They pulled forces back from conquered worlds to protect their core systems. This was exactly what Lauren wanted. Captain Ryan Torres had earned a new name among the Valorians. They called him the Ghost. His squadron of fast attack ships appeared without warning, destroyed their targets, and vanished before reinforcements could arrive. Valorian officers told their children scary stories about him. Ryan did not care about fame. He cared about revenge. Every Valorian ship he destroyed was payment for his wife. Every enemy soldier who died was justice for his daughter. He kept a picture of them in his cockpit, faded and worn from years of war. He looked at it before every battle. "We're coming up on the convoy," his sensor officer reported. 12 transport ships, 4 escorts. Ryan smiled. Transports meant supplies. Without supplies, the Valorian armies on occupied worlds would starve. Without armies, those worlds would be free. All ships, attack pattern Delta. Hit them hard and hit them fast. The battle was over in minutes. The escorts tried to fight, but Ryan's pilots were veterans of 100 engagements. They flew circles around the larger ships, picking them apart with precise strikes. The transports surrendered without firing a shot. Ryan boarded one of the captured ships himself. Inside, he found something unexpected. Not just food and weapons, but prisoners. Hundreds of aliens crammed into tiny cells. Barely alive. They were Keth, an insectoid species conquered by the Valorians a century ago. Their world had been strip-mined, their population enslaved. These prisoners were being transported to a labor camp, where they would work until they died. Ryan opened the cells. The Keth stared at him with their compound eyes, not understanding. No one had ever shown them kindness. The concept of rescue was foreign to them. "You're free," Ryan said, though he knew they could not understand his words. "We're going to take you somewhere safe." Word spread quickly among the Keth and other conquered species. The humans were fighting back. The humans were winning. The humans were freeing slaves and destroying Valorian bases. Hope, a concept that had died in the Empire long ago, began to grow again. The Dorvani were the next to rise up. Their planet had been turned into a massive mining operation. For generations, they had dug resources from their own world and watched the Valorians carry it away. When they heard about the human rebellion, they finally found the courage to fight. Their uprising was bloody and costly. Thousands died in the first days. But the Valorians could not spare troops to crush them. Every soldier sent to Dorvani was one less soldier defending something else. The Empire was stretching thin. On Earth, the tide finally turned. General Cole launched Operation Homecoming, the largest military action since the invasion began. Human forces attacked from every direction at once. Underground tunnels delivered soldiers behind enemy lines. Captured Valorian vehicles carried resistance fighters into enemy bases. The fighting lasted 6 months. Every city became a battlefield. Every street was painted with blood. The Valorians fought hard because they knew what defeat meant. They had burned human cities. They had murdered human children. There would be no mercy for them. Amy Dalton led her Shadow Wolves in the assault on Chicago. The city where her family had died. The city she had watched burn from the moon 5 years ago. She walked through streets she had known as a child, now turned to rubble and ruin. Her team found the building where her family's apartment had been. Nothing remained but a crater filled with weeds. Amy stood at the edge and felt tears run down her face for the first time since the war began. "Captain?" Danny Garcia asked softly. "Are you okay?" Amy wiped her eyes and turned back to her team. "I will be," she said. "When this is over, let's keep moving." The last Valorian holdout on Earth surrendered on a cold morning in December. General Cole accepted their surrender personally. He looked at the alien commander with no hatred, no anger, just exhaustion. "It's over," Cole said. On Earth at least. The liberation of Earth was broadcast across the galaxy, humans cheering in the ruins of their cities. Valorian prisoners being led away in chains, the flag of the Earth Liberation Army rising over what had once been enemy territory. Dr. Scott Palmer had a gift for this moment. His team had spent years working in secret, and now their creation was ready. A new class of warship, bigger and more powerful than anything built before. They called it the Dreadnought class. The first ship was named the Retribution. It was massive, bristling with weapons, powered by engines that could outrun any Valorian vessel. It was not a ship of defense. It was a ship designed for one purpose: to bring the war to the heart of the enemy. Admiral Price looked at the fleet gathering near Jupiter. Hundreds of human ships, joined by vessels from the Keth, the Dorvani, and a dozen other species who had joined the rebellion. It was the largest force ever assembled against the Valorian Empire. "Signal all ships," she ordered. "We're going to Valoria Prime. We're going to end this." Across the fleet, soldiers prepared for the final battle. They checked their weapons. They wrote letters to loved ones. They made peace with death, knowing that many of them would not survive. But they were not afraid. They had come too far to stop now. The war of survival was over. The war of vengeance was about to reach its end, and the humans would not be satisfied until the Valorian Empire was nothing but a memory. The Allied fleet emerged from hyperspace above Valoria Prime. For a moment, there was only silence, as thousands of human, Keth, and Dorvani warriors looked upon the homeworld of their enemy. It was a beautiful planet, green oceans and golden continents, cities that sparkled like jewels under the light of two suns. This was where the Valorian Empire had begun, centuries ago. This was where it would end. Admiral Lauren Price stood on the bridge of the Retribution, surrounded by officers who had survived years of impossible war. She looked at the massive Valorian fleet waiting for them. Thousands of warships, the greatest force the Empire had ever assembled. They had gathered everything they had to defend their home. "All ships, this is Admiral Price," she said into the fleet-wide channel. "Today we finish what they started. Today we show them what happens when you attack humanity. Remember our dead, remember our cities, and give them hell." The Battle of Valoria Prime began with a flash of weapons fire that lit up the darkness of space. Ships exploded. Beams of energy cut through metal and flesh. Fighters danced between the larger vessels, chasing each other in deadly spirals. Captain Amy Dalton flew the Vengeance into the heart of the enemy formation. Her ship was one of the fastest in the fleet, designed for getting into trouble and getting out again. But today she was not looking to escape. She was looking for one ship only. Overlord Vexus commanded from his flagship, the Dominator. It was the largest warship in the Valorian Navy, a monster of metal and fire that had destroyed dozens of worlds. Amy had dreamed of this moment for years. She had lost her family, her home, her entire world because of the creature who sat in that ship. "There he is," she said, pointing at the Dominator on her screen. "Take us in." "Captain, that ship is 3 times our size," Danny warned. "We can't beat it in a straight fight. Then we won't fight straight." The Vengeance dove toward the Dominator like a falcon attacking an eagle. Valorian guns tracked them, filling space with deadly fire. Amy's pilot, a woman named Chris who had learned to fly in the ruins of Earth, threw the ship into impossible turns. They dodged death 100 times in 100 seconds. They got close enough to see the Dominator's bridge through their windows. Amy imagined Vexus standing there, watching them come. She hoped he was afraid. She hoped he finally understood what he had created when he ordered the attack on Earth. "All weapons, fire," Amy ordered. The Vengeance unleashed everything it had. Missiles and beams and projectiles slammed into the Dominator's shields. The larger ship returned fire, and the Vengeance shuddered as explosions tore through its hull. Warning lights flashed everywhere. Systems failed. Crew members screamed. The Vengeance was dying, but it was taking its enemy with it. "Shields are down on the Dominator," Danny shouted. "We punched through." Amy made her decision in a heartbeat. She grabbed the controls from her pilot and aimed the crippled Vengeance at the Dominator's bridge. "Everyone to the escape pods, now." Captain, what are you doing? Finishing this. Go. The crew ran for the pods. Danny grabbed Amy's arm, trying to pull her with him, but she shook him off. Someone has to fly, she said. Get out. That's an order. Danny looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded and ran. The last escape pod launched just seconds before impact. The Vengeance hit the Dominator like a missile. The collision tore through both ships, creating an explosion that could be seen across the battlefield. Overlord Vexus died in that moment, along with his entire command staff. The creature who had ordered the destruction of Earth was gone. Amy never saw the explosion. She ejected at the last second, her damaged pod spinning wildly through the chaos of battle. When she woke up hours later, she was on Captain Torres's ship. He had found her pod drifting among the wreckage and pulled her in. You crazy woman, he said, smiling through tears. You actually did it. With Vexus dead, the Valorian fleet lost its coordination. Ships began to retreat, then to surrender. The battle that was supposed to last days was over in hours. General Nathan Cole led the ground assault personally. At 72 years old, he insisted on being among the first humans to set foot on Valorian soil. His doctors told him he was too old. His officers told him he was too important. He ignored them all. I started this, he said. I sent the first message. I asked people to fight, when fighting seemed hopeless. I'm going to finish it myself. The assault on the Valorian capital was fierce but short. The defenders fought hard, knowing they had no hope of mercy. But they were outnumbered and outgunned. The Allied forces pushed through their lines like water through cracks in a dam. Cole walked through the broken gates of the Imperial Palace, with his rifle in his hands. Valorian bodies lay everywhere. The golden halls were scorched and bloodied. At the end of the throne room, the Valorian Emperor waited for him. The Emperor was old, even by Valorian standards. His scales were pale and cracked. His eyes were tired. He had ruled the Empire for 200 years, and watched it grow from a single world to hundreds. Now he watched it die. You have won, the Emperor said. What happens now? Cole looked at the creature who had approved the attack on Earth. He thought about his friends who had died. His soldiers, who had sacrificed everything. The billions of humans who never got a chance to fight back. Now your empire ends, Cole said. Your military will be destroyed. Your conquered worlds will be freed. Your people will live. But they will never threaten anyone again. And you will face trial for what you did to Earth. We were just expanding, as all strong species do. We did not expect you to resist. That was your mistake. You hit us first. Now you pay the price. The treaty was signed 1 month later. The Valorian Empire, which had terrorized the galaxy for centuries, was dissolved. Their weapons were destroyed. Their colonies were given independence. A new galactic alliance was formed, with Earth as a founding member, dedicated to preventing any species from suffering what humanity had suffered. General Cole returned to Earth. He visited a memorial that had been built in the ruins of Washington. Black stone walls held the names of billions who had died in the invasion. He walked along those walls for hours, reading names, remembering faces. Amy Dalton found him there as the sun set. She walked with a limp now, a gift from her crash during the final battle. But she was alive. Against all odds, she had survived. Was it worth it? She asked. Cole thought about the question for a long time. The cost had been terrible. Half of humanity was gone. Cities lay in ruins. Generations had grown up knowing only war. Ask me in 100 years, he finally said. When children grow up without fear. When they play under open skies and never know what we went through. Ask them if freedom was worth the price. A century later, those children's grandchildren traveled among the stars. They learned about the war in schools, studied the battles, honored the heroes, but they never truly understood what it had been like. And that was exactly as it should be. Earth had been rebuilt. Humanity had grown strong. And somewhere, in the great memorial that covered an entire continent, the names of the fallen still stood, reminding everyone of the simple truth that had saved their species. When you hit humanity first, they will never stop coming for you.